Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. President Trump met with leaders in the Hispanic community today, holding a roundtable with business and education officials. He later signed an executive order creating the White House Hispanic Prosperity Initiative. The announcement comes as new polling shows a majority of Americans believe he's hurting race relations. According to a recent survey by Monmouth University, 62% of respondents said President Trump's handling of recent protests have made the situation worse. The White House is also grappling with its pandemic response as U.S. coronavirus cases top 3 million nationwide. The country's top infectious disease doctor is now urging hard-hit states to pause reopening plans. The Trump administration continues to express confidence in Dr. Anthony Fauci, despite not heeding some of his warnings. That includes President Trump's plan to move ahead with an outdoor rally in New Hampshire this weekend. His campaign says sanitizer and face masks will be provided to attendees. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court ruled Thursday prosecutors in New York can subpoena the president's financial records. In a pair of split decisions, the justices handed a win to the Manhattan District Attorney, but rejected efforts by House Democrats to secure the information. Earlier, Mr. Trump called both cases a hoax.
Well, the rulings were basically starting all over again, sending everything back down to the lower courts, and you start all over again. And so from a certain point, I'm satisfied. From another point, I'm not satisfied, because frankly, this is a political witch hunt, the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. It's a pure witch hunt. It's a hoax.
Both of President Trump's nominees to the court sided with the majority opinion in those cases. For more, let's bring in CBS News correspondent Nikole Killion. And Nikole, good to see you again. You know, a big question surrounding these decisions was, could the public see President Trump's tax returns before the November election? What is it looking like now?
Well, it still looks pretty unlikely at this point. You know, in essence, these pair of rulings kicks this back to a lower court, and certainly the president could potentially, fight this even further. And so given the litigation that does lie ahead, this is something that could take months, if not longer. So I doubt this will be settled before the election. Furthermore, the White House was asked earlier today just about the president's current tax returns and kind of where that stands. The White House has said what it has said time and again when it comes to that, saying that they remain under audit and giving no timetable whatsoever for when those could be released as well.
And in the meantime, so President Trump has reportedly been granted a second 45-day extension to file his annual financial disclosure form. What sort of information is in this report, Nikole, and why the delay?
Well, this is an annual report that is required under ethics regulations, and this is something that was actually due, I believe, back in May. And so, in essence, the president got this extension in part because the report in the White House's perspective was complicated, and that the president has been dealing with coronavirus and other matters. But these financial disclosure forms would give us a glimpse into the president's business dealings, into his assets, into his debts, into his family business. It's something certainly that he did file last year, but apparently this time around has been delayed.
Well, a few other recent high court rulings have gone against the Trump administration, including cases involving immigration and LGBTQ rights. In response, the president tweeted, quote, "Do you get the impression the Supreme Court doesn't like me?" What's behind the tensions between the executive and the judicial branch?
Well, this is certainly a tension that has existed for quite some time now, and the president, as you know, has been quite critical of judges in general since he has taken office. And it was kind of interesting because the White House was asked about this earlier today, and also whether or not the president had any misgivings about selecting or nominating justices like Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, who did side kind of against him more or less in this ruling. Obviously, the White House not fully seeing it that way, but the White House said that the takeaway for them is that the president needs to nominate more conservative judges and more conservative justices when it comes to some of these other matters where the court has more or less ruled against some of his positions. So that is something of note. Obviously, you also heard the president, too, in his comments there, just once again reiterating that he believes this is all a witch hunt and a part of a hoax and purely political. So again, it's a tension that has existed for some time now.
I want to turn to the pandemic. Dr. Anthony Fauci said today states seeing a surging number of coronavirus cases should pause their reopening plans. President Trump continues to insist the high infection rate is due to an increase in testing. How is the president's challenging of experts impacting the pandemic response?
Well, again, this is yet another tension, too, that we have seen with this president between some of his practices and behaviors and some of the recommendations and guidance and information that's been coming out of the coronavirus task force, specifically Dr. Fauci. The president has been emphasizing that part of the reason we're seeing this spike in cases is because of an increase in testing, but that really doesn't give the full picture. The White House has also been pointing to a decline in fatality cases as proof that, things aren't as bad as where they were this past spring. But again, it just doesn't give that full picture. And many health experts, are also looking at the number of hospitalizations, the percent of positive tests that are coming back from some of these hot spots. And so there's certainly a lot more that has to be taken into account than just increased testing.
Finally, Nikole, a new Monmouth University poll found a majority of Americans feel President Trump has made race relations worse. Among Republicans, 40% say discrimination is a big problem. That's a 14% drop from a few weeks ago. Give us some context here, Nikole. What has been the White House approach to these racial justice and discrimination issues?
Well, as you mentioned, right now or today, the president is meeting with Hispanic leaders. But that being said, a lot of people would argue that the president has not done enough when it's come to issues of racial justice. He has yet to give any type of speech addressing race relations and this current unrest that we have been seeing over the summer stemming from the death of George Floyd. And while the White House will say that the president has addressed George Floyd's death, that he does sympathize with these protesters who have taken to the streets over these past couple of weeks. On the same token, many critics argue that he continues to stoke divisions. For instance, looking back to his speeches last weekend over the July 4th holiday, feeling that they really are stoking this cultural and racial divisions within our society. Again, the White House argues otherwise, but again, while the White House will tout things, for instance, as far as African Americans, that they feel that African American unemployment has been low under this president, it has started to tick up a bit. Or they talk about, for instance, supporting HBCUs as a way that they've been supportive of the African American community. Sometimes when you're looking at the president's words, it says otherwise, whether you're looking at the tweets that he put out earlier this week about Bubba Wallace or the Confederate flag, some of the comments he has made about defending some of these Confederate statues and monuments, which again, we heard him talk about in the speeches last weekend. So really, it's a split picture or split reality, if you will, when it comes to the president's record on race. Certainly many calling for him to step up more to this issue, and certainly that may be what you're seeing reflected in this poll.
All right, Nikole Killion for us. Nikole, always great to have you. Thank you.
You bet.